So this was through JSPA?
No, that's different.
But you guys have to keep the pressure on because it's going to, I don't think we can realize how hard the fight is going to be. Did you watch the hearing today?
Because once the doors close, then it can backdraft.
So you know this could justify.
So if there's enough return coming into the basement, there's that door shut, then it's fighting against that pressure. Whether he gets down there, you could get the backdraft carbon monoxide to the house.
So that's like she is. I can't wait to hear about it.
Or at least that's what he told me. I believe
I would check to make sure you have enough return upstairs.
I can have a piece of paper stuck to the return, so it's a decent section in the room. Gotcha. Somebody knocked camera 3. Oh, shit.
You didn't get the robotic remote control?
No, I couldn't afford it. They cut our budget again. Ah, it's crooked. Make everybody pretend like it's
We're going to write with your toothbrush. That's going to work. That's just how things are in mommy's magic bag of tricks. Oh my God.
Stephanie? Good evening. I'd like to call to order this Tuesday, December 18th, 2018 regular meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. Welcome to this public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public School on behalf of all residents. We're always pleased when people attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items in the published agenda or on other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation, and law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We hope that our meetings provide a useful opportunity for communication between the board and community, so we thank you for attending. And I think tonight we probably will have 2 separate public comment sessions. We'll talk about that later. So with that, Ms. Kennedy, will you call the roll, please?
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Here.
Beth Barron.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Jess Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Daphne Kendall. Here. Greg Stenkowitz.
Here.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder, absent. Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Sam Harshbarger.
Here.
Allie Rounds, absent. Thank you.
Okay, and now we would move into item D, which is the adoption of the minutes. First, the minutes of November 27th, 2018. Can I have a motion and a second for that? Motion, Beth, and a second, Jess. Any questions or comments on those minutes? And we'll vote on them individually. And we came up with this great new system this time where we can vote by hand, and it'll take a lot less time than voting by machine. Show of hands, please, on these minutes.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah. Okay. Isn't that a great invention? Someone should have thought of that years ago. And now we move to item D2, the adoption of our closed session on December 4th, 2018. I need a motion and a second. Motion, Jess, and a second, Beth. And again, a show of hands. Any questions or comments on those minutes before the show of hands then? Okay, so now we move to item E, which is tribute. Oh,
Sorry, Pat. I just wanted to amend my first my vote for the minutes because I wasn't here on November 27th, so I'll abstain from that. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Peer pressure.
Okay. This is the hand thing. It threw you, right? Got excited.
Thank you. For the November was you first, November? Yeah. Yes.
A wrench in it, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's okay. All set? Okay, so now we move on to items E1 and E2. President's prerogative, E1 will last 30 seconds or less. And then, just kidding. But
Following along, that was a good job.
yeah, so I guess we move on to item E1.
Okay. Do we have to open this for,
Need a motion and a
do you need a
second for
motion?
item E?
Okay, great. So, maybe if we don't motion, it doesn't happen. I've had the privilege of serving and leading with both of these dedicated and hardworking board members that we are paying tribute to tonight for the past 3 years, and I haven't been looking forward to this evening or to this moment. One of the best parts for those of you watching from home about serving on the Board of Education is getting a chance to meet other community members who've decided to take on this volunteer role with you. So no matter how hard it may be, however, I'd like to say thank you to you and to your families. It is quite a commitment on the part of your families as well. Not only as a taxpayer and a parent, but as a board member and a friend. I've seen your engagement firsthand as I've served on multiple committees with you both, and I can say, Pat and Daphne, with confidence that you are both leaving this board better than you found it. So we will do the official work first, which is reading the official tributes to each of our departing board members, and then we will open up the floor for public comment at the end of those two for anyone who'd like to share in our congratulations and thanks. So Pat Sullivan, E1, whereas Patrick Sullivan is leaving the Princeton Board of Education after fulfilling 6 years of service, be it therefore resolved that the Board of Education recognize the contributions that Patrick Sullivan has made to our district and its students and thank him for his time and effort, especially for his work in the following areas. President from January 2017 to January 2019, Vice President from January 2015 to January 2017, Member of Facilities, Finance, Personnel, Student Achievement, PAA negotiations, PREA negotiations, PRESA negotiations, Chairperson of Finance and Student Achievement, and a liaison to the CPPTO, the JWPTO, and the PTOC. So of course those are just the roles that you have had, but so you've certainly done so much more. So Pat, from me, you've always taken the board's duty to consider the needs of all students as well as all citizens in our town very seriously. You welcomed Daphne and me when we joined the board at the start of your second term, and you've encouraged all board members, especially during the 2 years that you were the president, to take initiative in areas that were of interest to them. You've challenged our administrators to look at the quality and the quantity of homework, for example, and you've reminded all of us many times that it is not enough to have good conversations, but we must take action when action is needed. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment to this board, and we will miss you.
Thank you, Betsy.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you very much.
Do the rest of us get to jump in now, Betsy?
Yes, for E1, the floor is now open to the board.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So Pat, I really want to thank you for your leadership, your vision, and especially for your persistence. 6 years is 6 years, right?
Right, yeah.
Six and a half. It's a very long time to serve on the board, and your term probably would have been shorter had we just been able to achieve your vision faster. As Pat actually early on had the vision of, option 2 for athletes and less homework for students and more student engagement in the learning process. And it took us all a little bit longer to get where you initially had us envisioned to go. But in that process, through your leadership, I believe we've developed a culture of change in the district that is really based on collaboration among board members, among administrators, among staff, and especially among students. And Pat has been a champion of the student voice, whether it's the voices from our student board members who are reading the reports, and Pat was always quick to say that that was really the most exciting part of the meeting, and the reports that the superintendent gave and everyone else were much less so by comparison, or whether it was the voice of the students that came through the Challenge Success Survey that drive a lot of the changes that we're seeing in place now within our district. And those changes focused on improving student wellness, improving student engagement, and that will be a part of your legacy. Pat's departure from the board is really the end of an era. You've been the longest serving member here. But it's also, I think, the establishment of a legacy, and for me, that legacy has to do with listening. It was listening to the voices of our students, which we will continue to do, and it was through this referendum process, a legacy of listening to our community and making the right decisions based on that. So it has been a personal and professional pleasure to serve alongside of you. Spent a lot of late meetings sitting at this table. And I know that your family will welcome having you back on Tuesday nights, but you can always tune in if you'd like. I'm sure, Andrew, you do that regularly, don't you? Yes. So, Pat, congratulations. Thank you. We appreciated everything you did for us.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I'm going to respond later, but thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Pat, I'll just say, being our long-standing time on the board, the thing that you've taught me the most is to say, but what can we do now? I think more than anything, that's what you've taught me. What can we do now? And I appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
And Pat, I just wanted to say, from a very selfish point of view, you've been an incredible mentor, not just to me, but to many others around the table here. So thank you for that. I read somewhere that leadership really is allowing and enabling the others around you to grow to their potential and contribute. And you've done that in spades in so many ways. So thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Pat, I just like to add my sense. I think that a lot of what a Board of Education does is sets a tone and creates a spirit of access and accessibility for the community, and your response to the community. When I was speaking in front of the board as a community member before I was on the board, I remember having the sense that you had made it feel like it was possible to come and speak, and that accessibility is really key to what we need to do going forward as a board. And so I just want to thank you for setting that tone and for including the community in the process, which I think remains so important.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
If I could just add to Jess, I think we're going to go on, Pat, longer than you want us to. But also, having been in the community for the last 17 years or whatever, and with children coming through, I interacted with the school board for years. And I'm sorry that you're leaving us at a time when I feel like, as Steve would say, we're in this battleship, and it's turning a little bit. It's starting to move. And I've been privileged to be on the board this year with you and to serve and to see some of these things change. And I think the first thing that happened when I got on the board was the idea of the changing of the schedule of the high school. And there's been so many other things with the homework, and I thank you as a parent and a community member for your service.
Thank you.
My turn, Pat. I promise positive. I think early on you said, or at some point along the way, you said, why don't you try coming up with some of those creative financial ideas that you talked about? And I think we tried that this year in finance. Maybe at some point we'll start seeing the fruition of all those, but I appreciate that you threw out the challenge to try that stuff, and let's watch over the next year and let's see how much we actually save and how much it helps everything. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Any other board comments for E1 before we move to E2? And then we'll open it up to the public. Okay. Continuing on, E2, whereas Daphne Kendall is leaving the Princeton Board of Education after fulfilling 3 years of service, be it therefore resolved that the Board of Education recognize the contributions that Daphne Kendall has made to our district and its students and thank her for her time and effort, especially for her work in the following areas. Vice President, January 2017 to January 2018, member of Facilities, Finance, Policy, Student Achievement, Ad Hoc Revenue, Ad Hoc Equity, PA Negotiations, PREA Negotiations, Press Negotiations, Chairperson of Facilities, Policy, and the Ad Hoc Revenue Committee, and the Representative Liaison to the Littlebrook PTO, the JW PTO, and the Special Education PTO, and the PTOC. So, Daphne, it is no secret to anyone who saw our names plastered on all the same campaign signs last fall, or just a month or two ago, that I was hoping to be reelected with you for another term. Just 91 votes separated us and put me in this seat for the next 3 years. And it is quite an understatement to say that I am deeply disappointed to not serve alongside you. Okay. Hang on.
I told her if she didn't keep it together, she's going to have to leave.
Oh, can I leave? That's great. Okay, I'll leave. I've had a front seat to witness all the ways you've worked tirelessly and continuously to do what is right for the students in our district. I've always respected the fact that you never stopped asking your fellow board members, is this in the best interest of your students? You always showed up when we were invited to see learning in action, and you were never far from the job, even when traveling in Alaska. You've taught us all to ask tough questions and to consider the needs of every student, and we will miss you. So I offer Mr. Cochran the opportunity.
Thank you, Betsy. Every board member leaves a legacy. Daphne's legacy is going to be a passionate focus on optimal education for every child, especially students with learning differences or students with economic disadvantages. Equity was not a buzzword for you, Daphne. It was the North Star that guided all of your actions as a board member. You pushed us to examine our discipline policies and our differentiation of instruction, and we will continue to do that. As the chair of facilities, Daphne, she knew every detail in those plans, probably as well as Scott Downey, our architect, who's over there now. But it wasn't the building that motivated her. It was the students, the benefit to students. She was, for example, the strongest advocate of renovating the counseling center at the high school, where those important conversations happen between students and counselors. Yes, she knew the square footage of the space we're designing for wrestling, but she also knew how many students of color were on that wrestling team and how important it was for them to have that space. It's been a privilege to work with you, Daphne, both professionally and personally. You've been someone that I could count on for advice and support on a daily basis. And I just want you to know that the district is better because of you, and I know I speak for the entire community when I thank you for your service to this district and to its students. Thank you.
So I guess I'll tell a funny story about Daphne. The way that I first got to know Daphne was when she was in the audience during the PREA negotiations. And she, to put it mildly, she was tough on the board. And then she was so mad about everything that we were doing that she decided to run for school board. And she won. And so I thought, wow, how is this going to be? Because she used to beat us up every meeting, and how's it going to be working with Daphne Kendall? And I think one of the first times that we were together, Daphne said, oh, we're going to bond. And I thought, what? You know, and she said, we're going to bond. You see, we're going to bond. And I said, okay, well, we'll see about that. I find that a little hard to fathom after everything we've been through. But it turned out that that's exactly what happened. Daphne and I and many people on the board had so much in common that we never realized. And it was about the focus on kids. And everything that Daphne always did was about kids, even when she was criticizing us as a non-board member, it was always about the kids. And nobody worked harder than Daphne on this board. No offense to anybody, but Daphne worked very, very hard and tirelessly, as Steve said, always for the kids, always for equity, always for fairness. And so, Daphne, you'll be missed. You did so much. We appreciate everything that you did for all of us and for this community, and we're so proud of you. And so, thank you for everything.
My turn. All right, Daphne, this is a toast to you. You listened to the Stanford survey and pushed for a later start time and a reduction in math homework, and I thank you for that. You created a compromise for a smaller referendum and received buy-in from the whole board, and I thank you for that. You've always supported every child known, and I thank you for that. You've listened to concerns and assisted many special ed parents, and I thank you for that. You have reached across the aisles to form better working relations with the Princeton charter school community, and I thank you for that. You have ensured that every student wears the same team uniform, and I thank you for that. Oops, sorry. You have emphasized that everything we do needs to include equity for all students, and I thank you for that. You have met and spoken with many community members about their concerns, and I thank you for that. You've created a great working relationship with all three unions, and I thank you for that. You implemented the ad hoc revenue committee and basically have asked anyone for funding for our schools, and I thank you for that. You've been an amazing co-board member and an even better friend, and I truly thank you for that. I end my toast by raising to you a small world coffee in your honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn now. Daphne, I just knew you from baseball before this all started, and then I'm really glad that I got to know you over the last 2 years. Coffee at Small World, talking about board stuff, going out and getting a beer. After board meetings, pulling our hair out. You still have some, I don't. But to me, your legacy would be you improve my understanding that not all students are the same, but all are important. I'm going to start crying if I'm not careful, so I might walk out with Betsy. Especially those with special needs, of color, and of less means. I think it was some meeting we were at somewhere, and you were saying that if you can say it's a right of a person of color, you should be able to say it's a right of a special needs student. And it's like, that's a really good way to look at it. And so that has some that stuck in my mind. You've also left me now that you won't be in the meetings, but I'll be asking questions when I see the HIB and suspension reports, and they don't reflect the population of our district. You know, if I see a W, an H, or a B, it should look like our district. And if I see in special ed and there's an N, there should be a lot more N's than Y's. I enjoyed working with you in a bit of a good cop, bad cop routine in the various projects.
A few of us had that relationship.
Yeah. Trying to think who didn't. Policy, facilities, equity, and then begging money from various entities in our community that we got to do together. And I enjoyed that, and I will miss not getting to do that routine with you in the community. Thank you, and we'll miss working with you.
Thank you.
I'll add, Daphne, I think that the fact that the Committee on Equity is a standing committee of this board, when I came to the board, it was an ad hoc committee. The fact that there's a long-standing commitment to equity, I think, is a tribute to speaking up. And you did that, and that'll continue to stay with all of us. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to echo what a lot of other people already have said, and that's that the one thing that I always knew is that you are the conscience of this board when it came to issues of equity for students, all our students. And that's a legacy, that's an incredible legacy, and that's something that we're going to have to work really hard to try to continue on thanks to your efforts. So thank you for that.
Can I say one more thing before we turn it over to the public? So I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for, I've been here 6 years. There's a few people in the audience, like Andrea, who was here before me, who I'd like to thank as well. And when you step back, for all of us here, and not just the leaving people, but the people who are still here, like Steve, and then we have Stephanie leaving and Lou leaving soon, so it's kind of a bittersweet, mostly bitter time for, for many of us. But to just step back and think about where things were 6 years ago, and thanks to the efforts of you and many of the people in the audience, including Andrea, including Tim Quinn, other board members from the past, including Mr. Montgomery, who's been at meetings every single meeting almost for the past 6 years, what we've all accomplished, but especially Steve and Stephanie and Lou and Annie, all of your work. It's a little bit long, and I hope I don't bore you, but this is the kind of accomplishments that we've done over the last 6 years together. In terms of a better school experience, homework-free weekends, 97% reduction in graded math homework, reduced homework for freshmen, multiple ways to show proficiency, no courses graded solely on a midterm and final anymore, differentiated instruction for all of our children, more co-taught classes, a focus on anti-bullying in all our buildings, and an athletics department that's focusing on more than winning, about participation and sportsmanship. In terms of curricular improvements, a revised a culturally aware social studies curriculum, revised science curriculum, a makerspace and collaborative science projects at the middle school, fencing, women's volleyball, independent projects for high school seniors, the DLI program, which is huge at Community Park, advanced topics replacing APs in some subjects, a revamped service program. In terms of equity and fairness, which is Daphne and Betsy's work primarily, but many of us, equity survey, creating the equity survey, having every child be known as part of our strategic plan, having an equity committee, having racial and cultural sensitivity training, creating the minorities science summer camp, having a line item in our budget to ensure that kids can go on field trips regardless of their financial position, a requirement that all teachers are familiar with children's IEPs when they have them, and that special ed kids, thanks to Daphne, get schedules in advance of their school start date. In terms of wellness, having a strategic plan that's focused on wellness and academic excellence, a later start time at the high school, huge, a lot of work, a revised schedule at the high school that takes pressure off of kids, option 2 for PE, and even having Narcan and opioid training in our buildings. In terms of financial, having renewed our 10-year contract with Cranberry at $5 million a year. We got that done. We've had a AAA credit rating for 6 years running, thanks to Stephanie, 6 clean audits, 7 balanced budgets with less than 3% increases in them. We fought the charter school and lost, but then we came together with the charter school to communicate and hopefully put our problems behind us. We did a financial audit of the athletics program. Daphne primarily raised major funds from not-for-profits. And we did 2 major facility referendums in 2014 and 2018. We negotiated 6 union contracts. We have new supervisors in math, science, and social studies. We have a new superintendent who's a visionary and really an amazing leader, and a new assistant superintendent for curriculum. We're recruiting over 30% of our educators are educators of color now. We have created a sick leave bank so that teachers can share their sick days. We have independent study for administrators to learn on their own. In terms of the board, we have a new policy committee, thanks to Betsy, new equity committee, an alternative revenue committee, thanks to Daphne, a revised meeting agenda with more discussion and public comment, and a revised role for our student reps, who used to be sort of reporting out about the fun stuff and are now really diving into the issues at the high school. So I want to thank all of you for everything that you've done to make this happen. It's been great to be a part of it, and I think I'm really confident that as I leave this board, that that kind of thinking and great work is going to continue with so many smart and passionate people who care about kids and care about education in our town. So it's just been a terrific experience working with all of you. And look what we've done. It's been great. So thank you for letting me be a part of that.
That's great. I think there are some members of the public who'd like to speak on Section E. You're welcome to come to the microphone.
Am I on here? Yeah. Felicia Spitz, 5 Hazlitt, and I would like to say thank you to Pat, and I have a somewhat extended thank you for Daphne. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, "The test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still remain able to function." Daphne, you are the epitome of Fitzgerald's first-rate intelligence. You do this so very well, and it is what singularly makes you Daphne Kendall. You listen to all people all the time, even when you don't share their view or it actually opposes your own. You listen and you genuinely try to be inclusive and collaborate with this community. It appears that you're able to do this seamlessly, but I know it must be trying for you at times, and I thank you for your perseverance and your courage. Not only do you listen, but you also function, to his second point, and at an exceptionally high level. Your accomplishments during one term have been nothing short of remarkable. For those who see you only during this meeting with the full board, I want to point out that you were chair of committees in 2018, vice president in 2017, chair, co-chair, or member of the Alternative Revenue, Equity, Facilities, Finance, Policy, and Student Achievement Committee. You were instrumental in creating the ad hoc Alternative Revenue Committee and the Equity Committee, which has now received permanent status. There was literally only one committee which you did not sit on during your 3 years. The skills and leadership that you have brought to bear in your role will be sorely missed in both their breadth and their depth. In addition to your board leadership, you negotiated 3 labor union contracts, one of which started off where they were incredibly entrenched, and as Pat relayed the, the story of your beginnings here. And yet, with your intervention, that worked out. You've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the school through your efforts with the Alternative Revenue Committee, alleviating financial burden for all taxpayers in our town. There are literally millions more within reach thanks to your efforts. You have made this town a better place for our children, our teachers, and our staff. Frankly, your commitment to improving our schools and the buildings will make Princeton a better place for all residents for years to come. You have kept the most vulnerable students closest to your heart and have advocated for special and general education policies improvements that will benefit students for decades. Whether it was a matching cheerleading uniform or a policy to ensure that all students with an IEP receive fair disciplinary treatment, you advocated. When the student surveys revealed that our teens were exhausted, you advocated for a later start time. There's a level of dialogue with regard to race and equity that is unprecedented in our district, due in large part to your efforts. Unlike those, and I'm not going to say Ben Bernanke's name, but who would use a Board of Ed position to leverage themselves into a political career, right? You have done all that you've done to serve our children. The children have always been at the forefront of everything that you do. You are a shining beacon of honorable service. I'm here tonight because I know that many times strong people walk alone. It's only in retrospect that some in our community will appreciate all that you've done, and I want you to know that I already appreciate all that you've done, and I'm not alone in that admiration. You've touched the lives of thousands of children, literally. Because of you, they will learn with more joy and purpose. I often chuckle when people say they're unable to do something because they have a paycheck or they have a job they have to get to. I think it's relatively easy to motivate people to do something when you pay them. What is incredibly difficult is to motivate people by the sheer power of your vision and your personal will. You have done that exceptionally well. You should be proud of what you have accomplished in this very short period of time and know that your efforts have been noticed and are truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Special Ed PTO, we would like to say thank you to Patrick Sullivan for your thoughtful perspective, support, guidance, and for spending the time to listen to our challenges, needs, and applaud our successes. You've been a great advocate for all children, especially those with special needs. Thank you.
Okay, I was fine until everyone else started crying, but now I'm going to try and keep it together. I'll have to leave. That's okay. I'm really tired, so I'll be okay going home. When I was a parent just starting the journey with my own daughter, who has a learning disability, someone introduced me to Daphna, and thus began our journey together. It was a very scary process, and she became a really positive guide for me. She made the complicated simple, and the scary hopeful and productive, encouraged me to build positive relationships and to be a really positive advocate. Fast forward to Daphna on the board and us in the special education PTO. Daphna has been no different on the board, a fierce advocate, encouraging positive relationships, not just for special education students, which of course is why we're here, but for students that are often forgotten and students that are often set aside, not just your own child, but every kid in the district, and for that we're incredibly grateful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Heath, Benjamin Rush Lane. I am here as a parent of a child with special needs and a child whose life has been impacted by the work of Daphna Kendall. And so I'm here to publicly thank you for your service on the board, service that we have experienced personally. I won't go into details, but I just suffice it to say that Daphna, you were instrumental in helping my daughter get the accommodation she needed, as well as the uniform that she needed. So thank you. Never doubt that you had a great impact as a member of this board. Thank you.
Hi, Andrea Spalla, Maple Street. Before I start, I have made notes because I knew I would get really emotional, and I needed to. I'm just barely holding it together, Evelyn, just barely. First of all, I just have to say that list of accomplishments was stirring. I mean, just amazing. You guys should be so, so proud of yourselves. Makes me want to have another baby. My youngest is a senior, so.
It can happen.
So, yes. All good. It's all good. We're a small town. Everybody knows everybody. Before I start with my official remarks, my mom is in town for Christmas, and she said to say hi, Pat. And she said that I should remind everybody that I have known Pat for about 32 years. We met when I was 18 at college. And I didn't see him again after I graduated, and he graduated for a long time until we both found ourselves in Princeton raising our families. And as I became involved in volunteer work in the schools and then joined the school board, I had my eye on Pat because I knew he would be a phenomenal school board member. I just knew, and he has been. One of the best things about the town of Princeton and our schools community is how smart and actively engaged people are in public life. This, of course, also makes serving as an elected official on the school board challenging. And it takes more than just a little bit of courage to put your name on a ballot, as everyone here knows, and run for school board position in this town. It takes a lot of courage to do it twice, and both of our departing board members have done that. For your service and for your courage, this entire town is lucky and grateful. And speaking of courage in particular, Pat, you have served on this board with great courage and distinction for 6.5 years, 4 of those years in a leadership role. And there was a lot of talk tonight about legacy and leaving your mark and having a difference, making a difference in the lives of children. And I'm just going to amplify some of those beautiful sentiments that have already been said. It's because of your leadership, Pat, yours. Your financial acumen, your pragmatic, incisive approach to problem solving, your patience, your listening skills, as others have mentioned, that the school board has weathered, not just weathered,
but strategically navigated and successfully resolved 2 very difficult chapters in this community's life. Because of your leadership throughout this past year of difficult community conversations about our district's very real and very urgent facilities needs, the facilities referendum was approved. Those facilities improvements that will now happen are your legacy. Thousands of children will be educated in better school environments because of your leadership. Also because of your leadership, both in negotiations and in public, during the difficult and protracted teachers' contract negotiations several years ago. I think it was 2013, 14 and 15. A successful, financially sustainable contract was struck. One that allowed subsequent boards to balance their budgets without significant cuts, while meeting heightened staffing needs caused by rising enrollment, and even in the face of further drains on our revenues, for reasons that I won't go into here. That successful, collectively bargained contract, most of the terms of which are still in place today, and those subsequent budgets upon which that contract allowed to happen, are also your legacy. Sorry, I'm so emotional. Pat is also, some of you might not know this, in his own way, an educator. I know it seems weird, but he educates by his example. I always tell people that the most important skill a good board member has is asking hard questions. And Pat, from his first day on the board, always asks the hardest questions. 2 questions in particular that Pat is known for, and I think you've all alluded to. He is always the board member who asks why. Why do we do things this way? Why do we assume that what we've always done is what's best? And then the second question Pat always asks is, why not? Why can't we question the cult of AP courses and college admissions as a metric of success? Why can't we rethink the purpose and value of homework? Why can't we do more for the children in the middle of the pack? Why can't we make them known? And why can't we make them feel valued? Pat, throughout your leadership of this board, even more important than your other important legacies, your values, your example, and your questions have always provided me and all of your board colleagues with a true north for their decisions. I know that I speak for all of us who've had the privilege of working with you that it has been a pleasure, an honor, and an education. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Hi, Stephanie Chorney, Race Street. We had some really nice speakers tonight, so thank you, and I won't be able to compete with that, so I'll be brief. I just wanted to say thank you to the board for all of your hard work this year and give a special thank you to Daphna. During her time on the board, I greatly appreciated how vigorously Daphna has worked on so many issues for all of the students, staff, and parents in our school district and community. She has not been afraid to speak out, speak up, and challenge the status quo, and has been an active, engaged, and excellent board member. She is a true role model for our school board and district. Our school district is better off because of your tenure on the board, and I cannot thank you enough for your dedicating your time, your knowledge, your passion, and compassion in service to our community. I know many people in the community will miss your presence on the board. Thank you.
Hi, Tim Quinn, Wilton Street. What Andrea said. So, no, other than that, just to point out that Pat, you're the last of the Mohicans from our time on the board. And I just want to echo what Andrea said so well about your accomplishments. And and I look around the table here, and once Stephanie heads off into retirement, there's not going to be anyone except for Evelyn left who was here when you got here. and you're leaving the board and the district better than you found it. A highlight for me was when we were in this room on a Saturday afternoon and we decided to hire that guy sitting next to you. And I think if no other achievement, the litany of achievements that Andrea laid out, especially your familiarity with Chapter 78, the board's most important job, the most important job of a board member is to hire a superintendent. And I think we did a pretty good job. So, and I thank you for your questioning during that time and for helping us reach consensus. And I wish you well going forward. And I look forward to seeing you at the next Eagle Scout induction. And all the best.
Thank you, Tim. Uh-oh.
Hello, my name is Martha Easton. I'm married to Patrick Sullivan, which sometimes I try to conceal, but I'm usually outed one way or another. So I don't have any prepared remarks. I'll keep this very brief. A funny story that people don't know is that when Pat actually didn't think about running for the school board himself, it was actually Andrea's idea. And what people don't realize is that Andrea didn't ask Pat, she asked me. We sat in our living room and she said, you know, I think Pat would be really great on the school board. I think you should convince him to run for it. And I'm not sure if I think that was a good decision or not, looking back over the 6 years. But in fact, it's enriched Pat's life. It's enriched my life. Pat was really, I think, recruited to be on the school board because of his background as a lawyer, as somebody who's very accomplished in the finance business. During the 6 years he's been on the board, he's started his own company. He's had more than a full-time job. But for him, I think his heart has been with being on the school board. And I think he really appreciated Andrea encouraging him to do this, because for Pat, you know, as much as, you know, he has this great background in the law and in finance, for him, it has been about the children. Partially this is personal, but I think when we first moved to Princeton, we moved here because of the great schools. But we also realized that there's something more to having a great school than getting kids into a great college or getting high SAT scores or scoring the winning touchdown. School should be a place where everybody feels valued, where everybody feels comfortable, where everybody feels their worth, and not even in the most traditional ways. And we're living that in our own family, and we are living that with living in this district. And I think that this, not just Pat, but Daphne, Betsy, many people on the school board, you understand that every child known is they're not just words on a mission. There are things to aspire to. There are things that are to accomplish. And I think that you have done that. And what people don't perhaps realize is that also during these 6 years, Pat and I we've both lost our fathers. We've had a lot of personal challenges, but Pat loves children. He's also been the Scout Master of Troop 43 this whole time until fairly recently. He's been a Japanese tutor at Princeton Learning Cooperative, where he really lives this idea that not all children learn in conventional ways, and they all need to be supported. So for all of you, Pat respects all of you on the school board so much. He respects people in this community so much, because in the end, even if you have different ideas of accomplishing it, we all want the best for our children. So thank you for giving my husband this opportunity. I'm happy to get him back. But it's been a wonderful experience for our family, and we all have the greatest respect for you. And Daphne, I really, truly appreciate the particular expertise you have brought to this board, and I hope the rest of you will take this emphasis not just on buildings, but on children, and keep that at the forefront as you move forward. So thank you so much for your service.
Hi, Malachi Wood, teacher and resident. Should have jumped up here earlier. She said, it sounds like a tough act to follow. Wanted to thank you both for the countless hours that you put in, the years, all the work. I'm not going to make a list of anything because that's been covered. I will go back to the negotiations, the contentious negotiations you talked about. And it feels like a reunion, some of the people here. But just say one thing about you, Patrick, that's impressed me is that you've had crisis after crisis, truculence and contention and anger directed at you, and you've been nothing but more and more graceful and patient. And it's like when you ran the last time, I was thinking, this guy's crazy. What is he, what is he doing to himself? But I've been more than impressed with you. And you remind me of a Rolling Stones song, if you're familiar with them. And I won't sing. I'm not great with the lyrics, but it goes something like, I went down to the local school board to get my fair share of abuse. So just thank you for coming down here to get your fair share. And to Daphna, you know, I remember the anger that was directed, and as you know, I supported your campaign. And I was excited that it was meant a lot to me. I was excited that you got on the board, and it meant a lot to me. It was wonderful to see the harmony that you had. And all I can say to you is that you have not had your fair share. So, wish you were still on. So, thank you both.
Yeah, thanks, Malachi. Appreciate it. Okay, well, thank you all for those comments. That means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to Daphna as well. So we really appreciate that. It's been a great run, and we enjoyed it very much. So, but it's time to move on. So with that,
yeah,
we'll.
If I could just say,
go ahead.
I just wanted to, before you all leave, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming out and for the kind words. I'm truly grateful for the support and your belief in my vision for the schools. So thank you.
There is a public comment time coming up, but if you'd like to use your time now, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. I know a trip to the school board meetings wouldn't be complete unless I mentioned something that I thought could be tweaked. It was brought to my attention recently, since unfortunately I am not in the habit of looking at the agenda for all the school board meetings, that there's a food service policy that's on the agenda for tonight. So I believe that we started the health, wellness, and green teams at the school district so that the community would know about some of these policies that come up that need to be approved and changed. And I have worked for the past almost decade on wellness and sustainability in the school district, and it saddens me to be a part of the district and high school green team now and to not have known about this. So I still think there's a breakdown in communication between our wellness, sustainability, our district staff, our school board, teachers and students. So I am just here to point that out. I have some suggestions as to how that can be changed, which I'm not going to go into at the moment, but it's these type of things with policies that are coming up for review where we've put committees in place at the school district where they're not still working together. So thank you for letting me speak early.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so this gets us to item F, and since we've had a lot of talk already, I'll keep it very short, but I will mention the congratulations to the board and the community that on item 2, the special election results of our December 11th referendum were positive, and by a resounding margin, almost 60%, that we will have we've passed a referendum this year, so congratulations to everyone on the board, in the audience, who are not in the audience tonight, about that. And I guess I'll tell one little story that maybe reflects on the challenge ahead for next year. I got a call the other day from a board member of another district, and they said, well, we're considering a bond referendum, so I just wanted to reach out to you so you could give us some tips on how you did it. And so I paused for a minute and I said, well, let me tell you how it's done, because we really, knew how we had a plan all along. But as I stepped back and thought about it, the thing that I told this board member was, that you really need to communicate all the time, and to, number one, I think, you know, if we were going to do it again, and you probably are next year, do something again, to make sure that everybody understands the facts before we start talking about proposals. So make sure you have a level set about the facts and the needs and what the buildings look like. We kind of learned on the fly, I must confess, in 2018, how to do this, and we made some mistakes. We ultimately got to a great result, I think. But doing it again, I think it's just about engaging with everybody to make sure that we all agree. As we went through, we got so much help from people like Susan Canner to walk through the buildings and look at the facts on the ground, right? And so rather than talk about why the board chose this plan versus that plan when everybody wasn't on board with the facts in the first place, was probably the thing that, you know, I'll say it this way, in a positive way, that we realized in time to get something positive done this year. So I'd just like to thank everyone, including all the people who kicked us around all year. We've had people kick us around, Malachi, others, you know, it's all right. That's part of the process. So I mean that in the nicest way possible, that thanks to everyone for your input and support. It was a successful result. It's step one of a longer process, but we've all lived it on this board and in this community. We'll keep living it and hopefully do it in a respectful and constructive way as we move forward. But I'm very happy about that. So, and especially, I want to thank Steve Cochran for all of his tireless work. I think we had over 40 public meetings, all which involved Steve. Closer to 50. Many which I must confess, Steve wasn't treated respectfully 100% of the time, but he seems to have a thick skin and a sunny disposition. Doesn't seem to bother him. And so I'd just like to thank you, Stephanie, and Gary, and everyone for all the work that you guys did to pull this together and make it a reality. I think the kids will appreciate all of your work. So thank you so much. And then before we move to superintendent's report, I think we need to vote on item 3. Is that right, Ms. Kennedy? For the, yes, so this is for every year the board sets goals for our superintendent. The goals this year involved primarily the referendum, number 1, issues of equity, number 2, and also issues of technology and some other things that we thought were important in terms of moving things forward for kids. I'm happy to say that other than the technology one, which was sort of thwarted without, as a force majeure, our technology director resigned before we could get that done, that Steve achieved all of his goals for the year. And so next year, I think the board will be working on setting new goals for you, but it just attests, Steve, to all the fine work that you're doing. The goals that we set out is sort of a thing that we're required to do as a board, but you have goals for yourself. You've achieved all, many of them, as I just listed, over your tenure here so far. So we just want to express our appreciation for all of your vision and hard work and everything that you've done for the children of this town. And I think we need to vote.
First and second.
So we need a first and second. Yes, Beth, and a second, Greg. And any other questions or comments on it on F3? If there aren't any, then we're ready to vote.
I guess this is a personnel action. So I'll do a roll call vote.
Okay.
Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
And Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Passes.
Okay. And with that, then we move to item G, which is the superintendent's report.
All right. It's the last chance to have to pass that to me.
That's right.
So, first of all, just with regard to the merit goals, I just want to emphasize that I'm really motivated by mission, and so regardless of compensation, was glad to do the work, and it was a privilege to work with a visionary board and collaboratively with great administrators and teachers and staff to achieve what we did on behalf of kids. Secondly, the referendum. I want to echo a little bit of what you said, Pat. what a difference a week makes. So we passed the referendum a week ago, and I truly believe that the projects funded by the bond referendum will enhance the safety, security, and health of our buildings for students and staff. Tonight we have Scott Downey, our chief architect, here to engage us in a discussion about next steps in the implementation of the bond projects, the referendum projects. But before I turn things over to you, Scott, I did want to take an opportunity to offer my own thanks. And first to this board for your time, your dedication, your ability to ask hard questions, to make hard decisions, and most of all for your commitment to really listen to staff, to students, and to our community. I want to thank my own staff, Annie, Lou, Valerie, who's out there in communications, so many around the table, and especially Stephanie Kennedy for all that you gave throughout this process, countless hours, expertise, seasoned advice, patience, persistence, humor, and hope, unfailing hope. I want to echo your thank of Susan Cantor for touring more than 300 people through our high school, and she's continuing to offer those tours, by the way. And I want to thank all those individuals who really were committed to ensuring that our community had accurate information in advance of the referendum election. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I want to thank our community, those who voted for the bond referendum and those who voted against it. I think Princeton is a town that values both education and civic engagement. And I'm grateful to all, regardless of their views about the referendum, who made the time to tour our buildings, to attend presentations, the 40 or 50 that we held, to read through the materials, and to make their voices heard. The referendum, it's the result of respectful discourse and reasonable compromise, and I truly believe that as a community we established a path forward that does address our most immediate needs for our students, but also honors the economic diversity of our town, and I'm really grateful of that and proud of that. The referendum has established what I believe, what we can accomplish when we work together as a community, and I hope it can become a catalyst for continued conversations as we navigate the challenges that we know we face ahead. In the meantime, we have an approval of $26.9 million, and we want to demonstrate transparent stewardship of those monies as we move forward with the projects that we've approved as part of the referendum. And so Scott is here tonight to kind of engage the board in a discussion about next steps. I think the Finance Committee will probably report on the sale of the bonds, which will take place on January 9th, and we can talk a little bit more about the term of those bonds. I think it's a 20-year. I'm sorry. But I know that Scott, like, that's an important first step, and Scott has some of the other other steps related to the construction. But yeah, securing the funding is an important one. So, Mr. Downey, welcome back. Glad to have you here.
And the bow tie is back.
So just, I'll be brief, but to kind of cover a few things. It's been a week, but we are already underway. The engineering design process has started. Over the break, we're going to be in the schools and doing what we need to do to gather additional information. And I want to walk you through kind of the initial thoughts on a schedule of how things would be implemented, but with a caution, which is that you know, the schedule around a project like this is not simple. We've kind of laid out a starting point, but there's a lot of input we need to gather from the district in terms of the programming in the schools and operations to make sure that we don't trip over things as we implement this construction. Obviously, as we've talked about, construction can have a huge impact on schools, and we want to try and minimize that as much as we possibly can. So there's still a lot of input to be gathered in terms of how these things would move forward. But to break things down into kind of two main groups of projects, there's the first group of projects that we're trying to move so that work can happen in this first summer of 2019. and that includes an emphasis on the security improvements, the electrical service upgrades, and some of the HVAC and air conditioning work. There's two major caveats with the HVAC and air conditioning work that will probably end up stretching over 2 summers. How we break that down is yet to be determined, but we're looking very closely at lead times on equipment. HVAC and air conditioning projects that were done this summer, we saw longer than expected lead times on some equipment that was implemented, so we're trying to confirm where we think that will be come next summer. And the second one is really one that centers around impact on the schools. So, for example, we could put all the work out for bid in this first summer, but that would mean that all the schools would effectively be out of commission and all run the risk of, you know, if any one of those projects got delayed, or risks running into the fall, or schedule concerns in that direction. So probably unlikely we would do that, but how we break it down into what happens this summer and what happens next summer is something that we have to work out with the district yet. But we're moving in the direction of documenting it, designing it, putting ourselves in the position of being able to make those choices, and we'll be working that out in coming weeks with the district. So the improvements to the high school, the renovation of the fitness center, the renovation of the guidance area, the remote dining, and the small addition that's planned there, as well as the athletic fields, and the improvements to renovate the old library space at JW. Those improvements have a little bit of a longer time cycle to them for a couple of reasons. Number one, the design process is far more complicated. Number two, we have a broader set of approvals we have to go to. We have to go back to the Department of Education, for example, for a second educational approval on those projects. And the site projects also have a little bit of a longer timeline because there are site approvals associated with those. This is improvements to the fields, the drainage and retention improvements at the high school, and so forth. So those projects we're looking at probably bidding sometime around the summer. We like to maybe structure those so that as contractors have already loaded up, they're doing their summer work, they're looking for work going into the fall and beyond, we can be positioned to bid that work. That should line up with the design time and the approvals, and then that work, because of the construction involved with structure and everything else, will probably allow about a year time frame, so summer to summer in terms of a target construction window. Now again, all this subject to being worked out with the district's priorities, needs, operations, and so forth, and we'll be in a position to give you an update in a couple of weeks as we have those discussions. But that's the thought process right now. And then the last thing to keep in mind is, as was discussed, there's a goal here of an ongoing communication process and input process and associated with these projects. So we'll work with the district for whatever structure that's going to take in terms of the number of groups and so forth. We'll be probably conducting regular interface or meetings or discussions with those groups the early part of the year, January through March. That's a pretty critical time in terms of keeping to these schedules and moving things forward. And then I would imagine that would continue through construction and through the ongoing process as we move forward. So how that exactly looks, we'll have to determine, but we'll certainly fold it into the schedule as we move forward. So around those three kind of key points, I'm certainly happy to have any discussion or address any questions you might have.
I just had one question, Scott. A lot of these improvements are kind of infrastructure in nature, you know, kind of behind the plaster, if you will. But what happened to Fielding there? Are there designs being used for any of this, like the the counseling area in the high school, the guidance area in the high school? Or is F&I still involved in that design process?
Yes, they are. So I spoke to them this week. Specifically, their involvement is most heavy around the fitness center, and the addition in that area was part of the design that they had developed with us. The guidance being part of that project most likely would be the piece that their focus would be on. But they are engaged, and we've already had some discussions.
Okay. And just in terms of the process, I think the feedback I heard from people who have been very engaged in this referendum process, they're happy, I think, with the feedback, with the information you've been giving them before and after the referendum, I guess. Do you get the sense that the people who are really interested in every detail of what you're doing, are happy with what they're seeing from you so far? Is there a process in place for them to get information, or do we still need to develop that out a little bit?
We still need to develop that a little bit. So, you know, I imagine, and again, this is up to the district to decide, but I imagine that's probably going to consist of several groups with maybe different areas of focus that we would be meeting with on a regular basis to both report status and to solicit input on key decisions and considerations that are going to be associated with the projects themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Scott, so along that line, so as a board, we're hearing from you now kind of on what's going to happen going forward. Will there be particular times when decisions come back to us as a board or come to our committees for us to consider? So kind of decision trees, this type of system or that type of system, or I mean, how is that going to look for us in terms of the decisions that we make?
You know, you guys are completely out of this at this point. No. Yeah.
I mean, are we just done? We're done.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You guys will be integral to this. We'll be, you're going to see me on a regular basis. We'll keep you apprised of what's going on. We'll bring you updates, and there will be many, many decisions to be made along the process.
So I guess what I'm thinking about is when we think about how we're going to create committees and groups within the community that look and interact with you and interface and advise, I guess for us to give them proper instructions and proper kind of guardrails, I think it's important for us to understand the different points where we'll be asked to make decisions so we can then get information from the community to inform our decisions. So I guess if you could, maybe we can talk more about that offline, but it would be helpful for us going forward to kind of understand the stages where we will benefit from having broader input from the community.
Certainly, yeah, and I can map that out both in terms of dates, when decisions, key decisions we've made, but also in terms of the types of, you know, questions and inputs that would be valuable coming from you guys, yeah.
So, Scott, I'm sorry. With regard to this is my last meeting, I got to get it all in. So with regard to the guidance renovations, I know that came on late when we were scrambling to, after the acceptance didn't come in on time. What are your steps for proceeding with that?
So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a series of meetings with folks in the district and at the high school to dig into the programmatic considerations so that we can fine-tune a layout for that area and determine, you know, how it should be configured and get very much into the details, not just, you know, how many offices, but, you know, one of the big considerations there is how that area works, how it can accommodate the students it needs to accommodate, measures for privacy and public access to information at the same time. There's a lot in that needs to go into that, and we need a lot of information from your team in the district to pin that down. So over the next couple of weeks, that's really the most critical first step, and that's going to start right away.
Scott, I know there's been some confusion about the referendum at the state level on safety and security. Just wonder if there's any update on when we might know about what of those funds could be available to us to offset what we're doing in the community.
Yeah, I wish I had some specifics for you on that. We're in contact with the Department of Education. We've been asking regularly. They're still not releasing any information as to either what they would decide or what they would consider qualifying or what the process would be for that. So we will update you the minute anything changes in that process, but at this point we don't know timing, we don't know criteria, we don't know how it would impact things. But to the degree that the things that you would be implementing, particularly security, would be the primary one. To the degree the situation changes, we'll pivot as we need to try and take advantage of funding if it's there to increase what you have available to you.
One more thing. Could you speak briefly to the ESIP program? I know we met last week and heard the results of the preliminary state audit, but again, the ESIP, the Energy Savings Improvement Plan program projects that could possibly kind of interface with some of the referendum projects potentially, or be in addition to that might be happening at the same time. How do you see that kind of working together, the two kind of different efforts?
Sure. So again, so everybody understands, ESIP, Energy Savings Improvement Program. This is mechanism through the state where if we can identify projects that pay for themselves in 15 years or less, the district can undertake those projects without having to issue referendum debt. They do issue financing, but it's financing that is self-funding. So those projects have to be shown to pay for themselves not just over 15 years, but annually over that process. So the first step in that process was the development of an audit, energy audit of the district. That was undertaken without cost to the district through a program that the Board of Public Utilities puts out. So we did a review of the draft report that they had provided. There was some discussion around some of the things that we had some questions and some updates, and I need to cross-reference their assessment against some of the scope that we had considered might be appropriate for an ESIP. So I would suggest it really makes the most sense for everybody to think of it as two separate things. It's not a component of the referendum. It's financed and funded completely differently. And in fact, when we had planned out the referendum, things like lighting replacements, which are perfect candidates for an ESIP, we had specifically kept that scope out of the referendum, knowing that this vehicle was available to the district. So it's not so much that there's an overlap, but literally there are two different funding mechanisms at work. Now, they may be constructed at the same time, and that's perfectly okay. Districts do that all the time. We just have to manage the accounting with the costs and how the project gets advanced. And you know, we can do that, and we'll continue to monitor how those fit together as we move forward. Yeah, but that process is started now, and we'll discuss what your options are to move forward, and then we'll probably be back to the board relatively soon to present those options. Anything else?
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Oh, you have more. Yeah.
I do, yes, I do. Gabe, can you pull up the calendar? So on the agenda tonight, we have a first read of the calendar for 2019-2020. It will be on for a second final read in January. Before I talk through the calendar itself, a quick word about the process. This is the 11th version of the calendar since we started looking at the. No, not that calendar. Oh, sorry. It's the draft calendar under superintendent's comments, I think. The proposed calendar for 1920. So. From a process standpoint, it's not like I just sit in my office and create a calendar. There's conversation at the Student Achievement Committee level. We meet with parent leaders through the PTOC. We meet with teacher leaders through PREA. We meet with the administrative team. We get feedback on what's going to work best for students, for families. For the professional development that we have to incorporate into the full year. So there's no perfect calendar, but that makes everyone happy. But I think this one actually works fairly well. I'll invite Annie to jump in and help me. She was instrumental in forming some of the calendar. Betsy, you wake up in the middle of the night and think about this. One of the.
It's further up in the student achievement.
It's under
superintendent's.
Under my comments, under superintendent's report.
G3.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's all right.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. All right. So a few key points. Election Day is a staff development day. There will not be students in the school on the November election day, and as of right now, not in school on the June 2nd primary election day. The presidential primary election day. So the push to close on election day, it really came from a variety of sources, including the Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning. Their advice to us was that we do close on election day. And I know it was a struggle for me because I really do value the idea of our students seeing democracy in action, but at the same time, I need for our students to be safe, and it's hard to advocate for increases in security and to really push that for most of the school year, and then to have a day or two when everyone is allowed into our buildings. And so we've made the decision with this calendar to experiment with the closure of school on Election Day, and use that for staff development for our teachers. The other significant change is we had talked about the idea of starting school in August, and we brought the start of school for students back to after Labor Day. So you'll see that reflected on September 4th is the start of school for students. However, after consulting with the teachers and the administrators, we did make another shift to the calendar, and we actually now have 3 professional development days, 3 staff development days for teachers and administrators prior to the start of the school year. So we're excited about those days because those are days when we're getting ready to receive students. So it's an opportunity for teachers to review curriculum that's been written over the summer, to get professional development and new initiatives we may be unfolding, but it's also their opportunity to set up their classrooms, to read IEPs, to engage in orientation of new students, to take care of a lot of the nuts and bolts of starting a school year in a building. So we're excited to add that extra day at a time when we think it will be most beneficial to our teachers and to students and families. I think that's really all I wanted to share. There are a few shifts with the conference dates because of the changes that we made. Annie, I don't know if you want to add anything that you see as significant for the board to be aware of, or Betsy, if you're as a board member, as a parent, if you see some changes that you wanted to highlight.
I just want to thank you and Annie and everyone you mentioned. We really have. I joked in student achievement it was draft 9, but I feel like it was draft 90. And we really, it is much, much more difficult to put this together than it appears. But I agree with you, Steve. I think this is a great outcome for the year. And it is. It's up to 11, right? So thank you.
And it may be 12. I mean, we may get comments from people between now and January. The last day of school, assuming no snow, and of course that's really the edict here. There will be no snow in 2019-20. We would be ending the middle of June 16th.
So if I could just point something out, if you could scroll down to November, if you can see, there are 2 full weeks of school in November, and that did not happen by accident. That was a concerted effort that took 3 years to accomplish.
It takes a long time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and that's just in response to, especially the elementary parents. No school November. We're trying. There's 2 weeks now.
It's more school November.
Wait, what
now.
do you call it, Jessica? No school November.
Yeah.
So no more trips to Europe now.
No. Okay. I think that's it.
That's great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And also in item G is, I think it's just a discussion of the
board
calendar.
Right. Do you want to help with that, Stephanie, in terms of the board dates?
Just disconnect on this second. All right, I'll just talk loud. Thank you. So the draft board calendar for the year of 2019 was included for the board to review. It's not a public document yet because it is just up for discussion. There should be, I believe that all of you can see that. You should be able to see it. This is tentative. Really, we still try to focus on the 4th Tuesday of every month as a board meeting where possible. The things that are missing from here are an additional a retreat, which the dates of our NJ or our school board fellow representative is available, Jesse. So we could talk about that, our board guy. And then we have to put in a budget meeting, budget workshop, a couple budget workshops. So this is a first go at it. This doesn't get activated until reorg, so anybody can put in their comments. And we can add those dates in there. And then reorganization for the 2020 year appears on here because that's the calendar going forward. So organization for 2019 is January 3rd. And then January 5th will be the first board retreat on Saturday, January 5th.
Okay.
So that's the first. Sure, yeah, that's, yep, public, yep, absolutely. And I can talk away. So we can, board members can,
Well, I mean,
sure, I can.
given the
I
two
can-
board members aren't even here, you want to wait until after reorg to get their input on where, when, or you can reach out to them? Oh, it's okay.
So they just need to respond to Stephanie.
Did you, was
Secure a
this,
date, okay.
I didn't send, did you send it to the other two?
I think you sent it to everyone. I did send it to the other two.
Okay.
Maybe via email?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone should submit their.
Sure. All right, so are we
And
moving on? Oh,
just one last question related to the second meeting. Do we know, I know there's some search committee dates coming up. And if we have those search committee, I think we need to be sure we don't overlap with those. There's a board rep at those
Correct.
search
So
committees.
One search is January 9th. That one's
Right.
established. We haven't established a date for the
Okay.
high school principal.
So whatever's chosen for this can be avoided. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so now we're moving on to item H, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report. Can I have a motion? And anybody? Greg?
That's a consent.
That's a consent, so we just
We
gonna
can just
move
move along.
by. Okay, so we'll move on to board committee reports. So we start with our students, and Sam Harshbarger is here tonight to give that report.
Good evening. For our fourth student liaison report, Ali and I surveyed students on extracurricular inclusivity. We asked students about barriers to engaging in extracurriculars, as well as their perceptions of club leadership and participation trends. A total of 160 students were surveyed, with an overrepresentation of the senior class relative to the other grades sampled. As per usual, all of the students were surveyed and responded through a voluntary online Google survey posted in grade-specific Facebook groups. Of the students surveyed, 50% said that they had at least once been unable to participate in a club due to confusion over its meeting time or location. Around 15% of respondents stated that they had at least once been unable to participate in a club due to financial barriers, and 34% said that they had at least once been unable to participate because of family or work-related responsibilities. We also asked students what they thought about club leadership and the process of club leadership selection, across extracurriculars broadly. Half of the respondents said that they had been confused about a club leadership selection process. Additionally, 61% of students said that they believe that the same people run and participate in most extracurriculars. Only 41% of students said that they believe that club leadership selections are fair and open processes. In the process of surveying students, we heard frustration and confusion surrounding the funding of extracurriculars in the high school. Some club leaders and participants said that they wish their clubs would be considered for funding and their advisors for compensation, but were unsure of how to go about applying for these resources. We suggest that more information is released to students, staff, and faculty on how to apply for extracurricular advisor compensation. For next month, we are looking to survey students at the middle point of the year on their overall homework burden, comparing it to homework in years past. We also look forward to further alignment of the survey topics with subjects discussed in the Student Achievement Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so moving on to facilities with Chair Daphne Kendall.
Thanks, Pat. So on behalf of the Facilities Committee, I would like to thank the community and everyone involved for the passage of the referendum on December 11th. The passage of the referendum last week was a culmination of an almost 2-year process, including almost 50 public meetings involving thousands of community members. This year was a tough time to pass a referendum, especially with the changes to the federal tax laws, which was essentially a further increase in local taxes. So during the course of the year, I followed referendums in neighboring towns. And one that caught my eye was the referendum in Cherry Hill that was also on the ballot last Tuesday. Cherry Hill proposed a $203 million referendum broken down into 3 questions. All 3 questions failed. Over the course of the year, I've thought many times if we're proceeding the right way, and I think the fact that the referendum passed, the $27.9 million referendum passed, and the $203 million referendum in Cherry Hill didn't, I think shows that we took the right steps. We listened to the community, we heard concerns, and we were able to come up with a compromise that addressed the needs of our facilities and our schools with the concerns of local taxpayers. And I think really this sets the gold standard for community input. I'm not aware of any other discussion in town that involved so many community members and so many meetings. And I think ultimately we came up with the right result right now for our town. And so I'm grateful for everyone who was involved with that. And as Pat said before, even the people who opposed the referendum, I think they made several good points, and it did influence my thinking at least. I also wanted to add one more thing on the agenda tonight. 09, the board is accepting and authorizing the construction of an amphitheater to be built at Johnson Park Elementary School. This amphitheater is being funded solely by the Johnson Park PTO. The Johnson Park PTO will be responsible with complying with all coding and zoning issues. And on behalf of the Facilities Committee, we'd like to thank the Johnson Park PTO for their generous donation. And I will now pass the facilities report over to Bill Hare, who led the energy audit discussion last week.
I don't know that I'd say I led it, but I was going to actually jump in first on the Riverside. We met today on the Courtyard Committee for Bill Cirillo, so we met to discuss this ongoing project and how to get bids for the project closer to the amount of money we actually have in the budget. Facilities volunteered to save some of the costs by demoing the old wooden deck itself. If anybody would like to join in on that, I know Mark Shelley and I plan on being there for that. That will get us slightly closer, but there's still some difference between what we need and what we have. Daphne mentioned the energy audit, which Scott mentioned that was held on, presentation was held on December 12th of the draft energy audit of the district facilities. That work is ongoing for the final version of the energy audit. There were 2 points that struck me. One was the significant differences in energy efficiencies between the various schools. They gave some numbers. It was I don't know, 4% or 6%.
9.
Yeah, a 9 versus a 75.
Versus 79, yeah.
Where the higher the number, the better. That was stunning to me. Also, the differences in payback periods between some of the different energy savings. For example, I believe lighting was 3-4 years, while some of the ovens were, none of us will be alive before they pay. But I thought it was really fascinating, the detail they went through. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Daphne. And Bill, it's back to you on the on Finance Committee.
I don't think there's anything to say now since Steve.
I did not steal all of your thunder. There were some important nuggets in there for you to share with the community.
Well, the Finance Committee met twice in December, on the 13th and the 18th, and I'd like to focus on the meeting that was held on the 13th, when we met with our bond advisors to answer 3 questions. What would be the term of the bond? Who would sell the bonds? And on what date will we sell the bonds? So, before I answer those questions, it should be understood that about 5 members of the community were present in this open meeting, and their input was very valuable in making our decision for the bonds. I don't know that we, Beth, Greg, Steve, Stephanie, me, had a number for the term of what we thought it should be sitting there when it first started. So having about 5 members of the community there to throw out their views was really helpful. So the easy question was January 9th, 2019 for selling the bonds. The more robust, which is the term Greg said I should use, discussion, was who would sell the bonds. We ended up selecting Parity to conduct the bond sale. And then the most robust discussion was the term. Our initial proposal that everybody's familiar with was a 30-year term in which we expected to have a 4% interest rate. The net principal and interest would be about $31 million. We also, in our meeting, looked at 20 and 25-year terms and selected ultimately the 20-year term, which we predict could result in an interest rate of at most 3.5%, possibly lower based on some other recent bond sales in the area. We estimate that we could lower the principal and interest to about $26 million, a savings of about $5 million, and a 10-year shorter term. The additional costs compared to the proposed 30-year term, when I did the math, it seems like it's about $7 total over the first 3 years. First time I did the math, it was 26, and then I went back and did it again and said 7, so I'm not the best at addition. But it looked like between 7 and 26. The additional, we, the members of the board, the administration, the public came to the almost unanimous decision to select a 20-year term for our bonds January 9th. That's all from finance for me.
Great, thanks, Bill. That's pretty exciting. And next, personnel with Chair Debbie Bronfeld.
The Personnel Committee met yesterday, Monday, December 17th. We discussed the continued work that Student Services is doing on the residency audit. As of yesterday, 347 charter school students have been verified as to being domiciled in the district. There are 60 more students whose families need to come in and present their documentation. Tonight, the board will be approving an administrator's mentoring program. The district currently has the only 7-year mentoring program for teachers, one of 5 districts nationally with a mentoring program for support staff, and the only district in the nation to have all 3 mentoring programs. One for teachers, one for support staff, and now one for administrators. The district feels that mentoring plays a key role in not only the recruitment of staff, but also their long-term retention by providing new staff with support, advice, direction, and professional growth. Basically, we have a trifecta of mentoring programs. Yeah. The committee discussed the recently decided U.S. Supreme Court case, the Janus Agreement, which no longer makes paying dues mandatory. This case is being appealed on a state-to-state basis. Therefore, union dues are being placed in an escrow account for those who may want to withdraw them. The board will be approving that we acknowledge and accept the current Janus Agreement with NGEA. The committee reviewed all leaves of absences for December, which the board will approve tonight. The committee was informed that the first round of interviews occurred yesterday for the assistant superintendent for HR position. The next step is to bring candidates in for a district-wide search. The committee also discussed the interim business administrator who will be appointed by the board tonight from March 1st to June 30th, 2019, while a search takes place. The high school principal vacancy effective July 1, 2019 has been advertised and wide recruitment is underway. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Next, policy with Chair Greg Stankiewicz.
Yeah, good evening. And Policy Committee met twice since the last public meeting on December 7th and December 14th. Just to remind all board members and the public, we are transitioning from our old policy manual to our new NJSBA manual. And Stephanie, who's been integral in this process, can check me, but I think we're going from about 450 policies under the old one to around 300?
No, 350 to about 2-something.
Okay. So from about 350 to something. So one of the nice benefits of transitioning to this new policy manual is that it's more consolidated. Another nice thing is that should be much more easily and readily searchable by the public. But that means that as of right now, we are still in the midst of transitioning and in between and in betwixt 2 separate policy manuals. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the Policy Committee and to thank Stephanie and Patty for all the hard work that's gone into it. We're, I think, a little bit more than halfway through. And so I also wanted to report back to the full board what we're asking the board to review tonight, which is about 18 policies for second reading from the 3,000 policies, business operations, and Lou has been integral in reviewing that with us as well. I'm sorry, Lou was integral in the 4,000 series, so we have 7 policies up for second reading on the 4,000s, and 13 policies up for first reading from the 4,000 policy series. So it's been painstaking work. We are going to try to fast track the second half of the policy manual, and we're going to try to separate it so that each remaining policy member over the next 2 weeks is going to go through one chapter, and we'll see how far we get. But that's to try to get us to a point where we're back to the one new policy manual to make it easier for the public and make it easier for ourselves. So again, I want to thank everyone involved with this. It was a torturous policy process. At the same time, we fully realize that there are large policy issues that do confront the district. And on the December 14th meeting, we did spend a good deal of time beginning to look at our vaping policy, and I really appreciate the input from Principal Snyder and Assistant Principal Jessica Baxter on that as well. So it's a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde approach. But what we have also been doing is anytime there's something that might be controversial, we are setting it aside and tabling it, whether it's something that we identified in policy committee, and we'll come back to it, or we've brought some things up here. If there are issues, we're more than happy to put that aside and revisit that as well. So just to let everyone know why we're trying to fast track through this, that's our purpose, and that's the goal that we set for ourselves. And again, thank you very much to all the policy committee members for all their hard work. So.
Thanks, Greg. Okay,
but Greg, to your point, if you're just changing the policy and just converting it over, state mandate, no changes, we're just making those, you're just making the recommendation, doing a first reading, a second reading, so that we can review those, and then we're just moving forward on those. So we're not really really fleecing those full out. We're just making the conversion.
Absolutely, and
okay.
Thanks. That's exactly right,
yeah.
and that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the process, and we're going to try to fast track it as much as possible, so that the next policy committee can focus on the really important issues.
Great, thank you. Okay, next. Student Achievement with Chair Betsy Baglio.
Thank you. We met in this room on Friday, the 14th of December from 11:30 to 3. Field trips and an overnight student trip were approved. They're on tonight's agenda for the board to approve. Cecilia Burge attended Student Achievement to present a proposal for research at PHS, and that project was approved as well. We also discussed and approved the first draft of the calendar that Superintendent Cochran has already presented. I will be asking to look at a 2020-2021 calendar as soon as possible. So be on the lookout for that. Gary Snyder and Christina Donovan attended Student Achievement to share changes within this year's PHS program of studies. They also shared the process that is used to determine when new courses are considered and under-enrolled courses are canceled. Often, as well as is the case this year, courses and their titles are updated to reflect students' interests and needs. As Dr. Donovan also said, the program of studies is not the schedule, but it's a list of potential offerings. So every single course in the program of studies is not necessarily offered. So PHS staff also begin working with parents and students this January for student schedules to be completed by September, and that includes our current 8th graders. So we thank them for all the work that they do year after year to schedule our students, which is a difficult feat. Deneen Grushaz and Priscilla Russell attended SAC to update the committee on the DLI program at CP, currently in its 4th year of implementation. This past fall, was made available to incoming kindergartners from the other 3 elementary schools, and this will again be offered to students from all 4 of our elementary schools for the 2019-2020 school year. So incoming kindergartners, and also there are spots for first graders who are interested in participating, should contact CP for more information. The committee will continue to receive updates about next steps for the DLI program, both for entering at kindergarten and as these students in the program get closer to the start of middle school. Finally, I just want to say we're grateful to the representatives from the YMCA and the YWCA for attending Student Achievement to share information about the aftercare programs that they run in our elementary schools. We discussed issues such as eliciting parent feedback and increased communication with our school staff, so we look forward to more conversations. Our next Student Achievement meeting is scheduled for Friday, January 11th at 11:30. The public is invited to attend, and I'll echo what Daphne said. Given that it's the end of the year, I want to thank the Student Achievement Committee from this year and also our large number of community members who come out to these meetings. So if you're watching, thank you for participating because you make the process better. So thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Daphne, do you have a report on ad hoc revenue this month?
No, does Steve have anything?
I do not.
Okay, well, we'll move on then. Next,
But, let me add something.
Yeah.
So I would like to say that when I joined the board in 2016, this is one of the things I ran on, was to get money from non-public institutions that send kids to Princeton public schools. And my first year, I was very Princeton, and I was told, friends don't ask friends for money. But when you became the president in 2017, you supported these endeavors, and ultimately, you supported the taxpayers, and it was the right thing to do. So I appreciate your support. It couldn't have happened without your backing, so thank you.
well, thanks, Daphne. I think people said this already, but I'll just say it again. That, many people ran on the idea that they were going to collect money from people. Probably I did too when I first ran. But, you're the only person who actually did it. And so I really appreciate all of your work on that. Couldn't have done it without you. And, I believe that your efforts will have paid off a lot, and I'm hopeful that they will pay off into the future. That's my sense, and I'm hoping that that will come to fruition. So thank you again for all your hard work, and the rest of the committee too. But really, it was under your leadership that this happened. So thank you for all of your work there.
Thank you.
Okay, and then finally, the Equity Committee with Betsy
Yes.
Bagwell.
The Equity Committee met December 6th. Actually, no, we meant to meet December 6th, and we had to cancel that meeting. So we ended up on the 12th, I believe, right? Thank you.
Peanut gallery.
Thank you. It takes a village. It really does for all of these committees. We had a great meeting. Pat Lenahan attended the Equity Committee to review the data. Those of you who are parents, you received a survey about equity in the arts, and he reviewed that with us. We talked about some improvements for the coming year, including increased and improved communication to show that music in our schools is truly available. Visual and performing arts are truly available for every child. The Equity Committee thanks Pat Lenahan for his initiative this year, and we hope that he'll come back for updates once or twice annually in our now permanent Equity Committee so that we can look at these levels of participation. Brian Dubinsky came to update the committee on changes that had happened within the Department of Athletics this year related to equity, and quite a few new initiatives have really improved the diversity of the students playing sports in our schools, and we're very grateful to Brian for his efforts as well. Tim Charleston came to talk about some funding for 6th and 7th grade field trips, as well as the MAP program, which is our mobile access program, and the funding that remains, and we sort of brainstormed about how to keep that program going, because there is a cost to doing that, but that provides hotspots and computers to families in our district who would not otherwise have access to that important technology. The next equity meeting will be scheduled when the committee is reconstituted in 2019. The public will be welcome to join. And again, I thank the equity team this year and our administrators and the entire board for taking this from an ad hoc committee to a permanent committee. Thank you. Oh, thank you. It was December 11th, Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item J, which is our public forum. Many people already had a chance to speak, but if there was anyone who wanted to speak at this public forum, now's the time to do so. If you just ask you to identify yourself and where you live. If there is anyone, Mr. Montgomery.
Will there be another one at the very end?
Yes, there can be. Yeah, so.
I have something that would be appropriate only at the very end.
Okay, great. We'll wait for that. All right. So let's move on then to item K. K1 is policies, and are we going to motion all of K, Stephanie, or we have action in here? K1 is discussion, K2 is action.
Right.
So what you want to just discuss K1, we don't really need a motion for it, right?
Correct.
So if there's any discussion on any of the K1 policies?
Are we having public presentation now? Or
Yes, if you'd like to, floor is open if you'd like to, yes.
No.
Sorry, Jess, yeah.
Thank you. I got me here first, and I apologize. I'm Rod Perry. Before I start, I have a quick question for George.
3 weeks from tomorrow, somebody is going to hand a $27 million check to Miss Kennedy here, and she's not going to go away with it. The $27 million have to be dispersed over the next year and a half, 2 years, to whoever is going to do what the referendum said they're going to do. And I just would suggest that in spite of the fact that we don't know the schedule, we don't know when the bidding is going to be and all that, that George makes some kind of an attempt to come up with a schedule of how the money is going to be dispersed, even though it's just your imagination. Because how that money is invested over the next year and a half or 2 years can make a difference in hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest income. So if by 3 weeks from tomorrow we have a list, we can, Ms. Kennedy can come up with some kind of, what do you say, rational decisions on how long is she going to invest $5 million or $10 million and so on. I have no speech and I have no preparation. I just want to say that the English language is very, very fickle sometimes. And if I say that this is going to be my last appearance in front of this board, many people may be happy, but this board is not going to be here next year. It's going to be a different board. If I say this is my last appearance this year, that's very clear. So with that kind of a thing, it's not only the English language, it's the numbers. Numbers are just as difficult as words. And sometimes they are even more difficult because words people are used to, numbers they are not. And which brings me to my favorite subject, the bonds. And I must say, before that, it's not until I really started getting immersed over here in this process that I realized the enormity of amount of work that everybody on this board is doing. The number of different problems, the numbers of different pieces of data, the number of, would I even say, minutia that is going around all over the place must occupy you people, all of which are volunteers, quite a bit. I know it occupied me in the last 3 months quite a bit, just trying to figure out certain things. So to say thank you is just not enough. I mean, if I had a hat, I would take my hat off. But that's, and talking about language, we have difference of opinions about language and meaning, and I really want to appreciate very much what President Sullivan has done here as chairman of this group, because it's like a conductor of an orchestra, where you got to make sure that everybody is playing the tune at the right time. Everybody can play the tune, but playing it at the right time and putting them together is difficult. And I think that you've done a marvelous job from what I have seen. We had a little different of opinion, which had to do with language. To you, 3 minutes is 180 seconds. To me, time is history. It's what happened yesterday. We talk about what happened tomorrow. But aside from all this, I had the honor and pleasure to spent some time with the Finance Committee last week when we came to talk about the bonds, and I was gratified at the end of the meeting when finally, after all the discussions and words and questions and all the numbers, the committee came down to the decision to do a 20-year bond, which was the most rational thing that could be done. Even now, excuse me, there were two 20-year bonds, and everybody voted for the first type of bond. I voted for the second one, simply because the second one was going to save almost another $1 million over the life of the bond, but would have increased the tax levy up front by $50 to $100. And it was a question, do you pay for it now? Do you pay for it later? Hey, we got $4.5 million already. Let's not be pigs in here. And that's important. What's important is that the school, to me, is not an island. They are the taxpayer. And I looked this afternoon, I tried to figure out why are there some difference in some numbers over there between Plan 1 and Plan 2 on this bond. And I realized something, that as we are losing the so-called, what I just said, the $1 million, we're not really losing the whole $1 million. The state loses $300,000 out of it. So the school could walk around and say, hey, we're taking care of the state too. We don't want them to spend money, because if the state spends money, sooner or later it comes back to us in some way. There was all kind of ways of coming back. So that's basically, but I am happy that we have this bond, and I'm happy that we have whatever is going to come out from the $27 million, because I don't know much about, I mean, I know much about air conditioning and things like that, but that's history. It's needed. And when it's needed, it's needed. Don't sit and cry and say, yeah, I need it, but I'm not going to do it. So I want to thank you very much again. I want to thank the board for all the work you're doing. And I really want to wish you all very happy holidays. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Perry. All right, so now we're going to move to item K, the first reading. Any questions or comments on the K1 first reading items? I don't think we're going to have any. And then if that, then we have to move to K2, which is the second reading, which is we need a motion and a second to begin discussion. So can I have a motion and a second for K2, Betsy, and a second, Beth? Okay, is there any questions or comments on?
So, I'm sorry.
On K2,
So,
okay. We're on K2. It was Betsy and Beth.
Okay.
Okay, any questions or comments on any of the K2 policies? I guess maybe I'll kick it off. I just wanted to follow up on what Stephanie Chorney raised as an issue. Can you, I mean, it was a little bit, sounded like she maybe had had some discussions with some of you. I wasn't exactly sure what it was she had objected to.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's K3.
Oh, that's K3. Sorry. Okay.
But I had a request from the other members of the policy committee, and I concur with that as well. We tabled two other policies that are around food services for further review, and so we're more than happy to then table this one as well and just regard them as a full unit. So if everyone's, fine with that, we'll just ask that K3 be tabled, and we'll just, look at K2.
Okay, so we're a little out of order. I guess we need a motion second to discuss K3. So I guess we'll get to that. So sorry to jump the gun there. Any other questions or comments on K2 items?
Just that there is also a free and reduced lunch policy on K2 about milk only. So I didn't, if we're okay with that, we'll, okay.
We don't
I
have
didn't
a
know
milk.
if you needed to see them all together, but we'll just keep that in, okay.
And that one just was the mandate from the federal and state mandate. So we thought that one could stand on its own without further review.
Changed, right? The federal mandate, they just rolled back the Obama nutrition requirements to ice cream and McDonald's.
So we'll double check, we'll
Yep.
double back with
Get it.
NJSBA on that. Yeah.
Trump only eats McDonald's and ice cream. So that's what they rolled it back to.
Okay, so with that, we need we're ready for a vote on the K2, the K2s? And we're going to do this by hand, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Just K2.
just K2.
Just K2.
All in favor?
Are you guys in favor of K2?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So that is unanimous. And now, just a motion on K3.
The motion will be
Table.
to table. The action will be to table.
So we're going to motion to table K3. Motion is Greg, second Betsy.
I just want to comment though on K3.
Just,
Because at first, when I read it, it made it seem like it was a federal thing, but personally, I could not approve it at all. I struggle with this whole à la carte and buying the whole meal, and I don't know if we need better signage, if we need to educate our free and reduced kids, if we need to educate our cafeteria people. I just remember last spring, there was a kid at the middle school who, for whatever reason, had a bill and was petrified to tell his parents he was on free and reduced because he knew they couldn't pay for it. And he didn't eat then for like a while. If it's federal, I don't know, but I struggle with it, and I don't know, and I've read the policy because Annie gave it to me, but I just don't know how we can educate more. So that, the kids take the food and then throw it in the trash, which is very sad that is the way our whole free and reduced lunch, in the federal or the state is created. But anyway, just wanted to give my 2 cents.
And that we're required to encourage that
Right,
behavior.
exactly,
It's
yes.
not only that that's wrong, but that we're saying this is what you need to do.
Please
so.
take the apple and then
Right,
throw it out.
and just throw it out. It's just fine, just throw it. Right.
So thank you for
Yes, thanks for tabling
separating it.
I just want to acknowledge Stephanie Chorney and the work of the Wellness Committee, which I know has been so important in looking at so much of what goes on in our schools. And as a policy committee, I know that we want to have that input. And so I'm glad that we're tabling this so that we can have that conversation.
Okay, so we have motion second, and now do we need to vote to table it, or is, yeah, we do. Okay, so vote to table K3. Sorry, vote to table K3. All in favor? It looks like it is unanimous. And that moves us to item L for personnel. And so let us start with L1. Could I have a motion to discuss L1? Daphne, and second.
Raise your hand.
Betsy? Okay. Any comments on L1 items? Betsy, Daphne and Betsy.
Is there anything we need to talk about?
There are
Is there?
there are a few things we need to talk about. But let me start with Mr. Snyder, Gary Snyder, who is retiring at the end of this school year, and this is after 15 years serving at Princeton High School as the principal. And it's not always easy to take a great school and make it better. There were those who say, well, why tamper with, record high SAT scores and AP exams? But Gary had the courage to do that because his goal was really student wellness. And to me, Gary he's a person of integrity and intelligence and vision. And I am incredibly grateful for the leadership, for his leadership, and for the opportunity I had to work closely with him in the last few years of his tenure here in Princeton. As a principal, Gary brought significant changes to Princeton High School. Project-based learning, larger blocks of instructional time, a later start to the school day. These are just some of the significant initiatives he worked with his faculty to make a reality. His goal for students was that they would experience the same kind of joy, excitement during the school day that they had in their after-school activities, and he made that a true commitment. I'm really pleased with the way he made those changes come about through working so closely with his staff and really listening to the students as well. And what's unusual is that in many districts, the changes for a district begin with the youngest learners in the elementary school. But what's happened here in Princeton is that the changes at the high school are actually impacting the way we're teaching and thinking throughout the system. And so really all of the students in our district have benefited from Gary's leadership and the changes that he's brought about. So I want to thank him, and I'm excited for him. I wish him the best of luck in this next phase of his life. I know he's in the process of earning his doctorate and is probably looking forward to some time to write that dissertation and ride his bike. So, did you want to say something about Gary?
I do, actually. Gary and I think started at Princeton High School about the same time. Everyone says, how do you take a great high school and make it better? When Gary started at Princeton, Princeton was not pretty. There was trash in the hallways. Students were maybe not as safe as they are now. The staff was wonderful, of course, but Gary created real change in the high school. And Gary did it in a way without a lot of fanfare. The soccer team would go to states, and Gary would go, "That's nice, go back to class." The studio band would win at Berkeley, and Gary'd say, "That's nice, go back to class." And Princeton High School would be on the cover of every newspaper for being the #1 high school in the state of New Jersey. And Gary would also say, "Very nice, that's the bell. Can we go back to class?" Gary had a way of bringing levity to the most intense situations and the most fun situations. Some people appreciated that, some people didn't. I grew over my tenure with Gary to have great appreciation for that. I think the one thing I can say with great affection about Gary is I've seen Gary change, and I've seen Gary grow. His last presentation to the board when he presented the bell schedule change and his enthusiasm for the teachers' buy-in and what the teachers did and what they created as a team, that was real change, and that was real love of education, and that was just an amazing effort, I think, for Gary and for the district. And Steve, a real credit to you for the work that you and Gary have done together. So I can say that from when he started to where it is now, it's always been something to be proud of. But Gary just walked a very level line, and I think for his tenure, it was what the school needed, and it took us a long way in a good, positive direction. So for Gary, I'm so grateful.
Okay, any other comments on anyone else?
Yeah, there's, I just have one other thing I want to say. So, Stephanie Kennedy.
What did I tell you? I was going to kick you.
She did. Actually, that's where I want to begin. She said, "Do not talk about me. Whatever you do, do not read that long litany of things that I accomplished like you did for Lou. And if you do, I will kick you under the table." So I thought I had strategically moved myself far enough away. So I will try and keep it brief, but I'll begin by saying this. So a teacher recently found out that Stephanie was leaving, and her first remark was, "Oh no, she can't leave. She's the one who actually runs the district." And mind you, I take no real offense at this. Because after 21 years as the business administrator, she actually pretty much does run the district. And she does it faithfully and effectively and always sort of behind the scenes. But transportation, Stephanie. Buildings and grounds, Stephanie. School supplies, Stephanie. Salaries, Stephanie. Budget, Stephanie. It all happens because of her. There are really two kinds of school business administrators that I've discovered in my years. There's there's the ones who focus on money, and then the ones who focus on students. And Stephanie is definitely the second kind. You know, the money was always in the service of students, and her stewardship of this district was always to make sure we had enough for the kids who were our priority. And yes, the budget balanced, but it was always, you know, do you really need that, Steve? We'll make it happen. And I know that I wasn't alone as an administrator in ways in which she made that happen. To be sure, Stephanie ran a very tight ship. You don't get 21 years of perfect audits. You know, yeah, just doesn't happen by itself. But I have to say, every day, Stephanie would make me laugh. And we would talk multiple times each day. And every time I would call her, she would answer the phone. It would be, "Superintendent Cochran." And I would say, "Hello, Business Administrator Kennedy." And it was this, this tongue-in-cheek formality that we had because we were dealing with chaos usually. I was calling to say, yes, there's $1 million gap in the budget. What are we going to do about that? Or yet there's another, you know, Oprah request. So when the craziness and the chaos was happening, it was Stephanie that grounded me. She, no matter what the issue, no matter what she was presented with, she approached it with professionalism and expertise, patience, and humanity. You know, I watched you at the last board meeting when we honored the bus drivers and just how proud you were of the people you had hired and the relationships you developed and the work that they were doing and their love of their jobs and of kids. So, Stephanie, there are no words that can describe the contributions you have made to this district. I can feel it personally. I'm a better superintendent because I had the opportunity to work with you. And I'm a better person because I had the opportunity to work with you. Stephanie was always there to make sure that my life was balanced. She'd ask about my dogs and send me home to my wife when I was working too late. She has an amazing zest for life. She's got husband, son in high school, dog Milo. She loves to travel. Since I've been here, you've been to, I think it was safari in Kenya. You hiked to the top of Machu Picchu in Peru. I think last summer you were in, Budapest on a river cruise. So I know that the world is open to you now, and there's lots of exciting opportunities that I know you're going to take advantage of. I hope you spend some time just relaxing with Milo and your family. And yes, yeah, we would always joke about enjoying a drink with an umbrella in it somewhere on a beach at some point. But no, you've been a wonderful friend, an amazing administrator, and your contributions to the staff, the students, the facilities of this district will live forever. So thank you. And now I'm opening the floor to anybody else who'd like to make some comments.
We have to take a roll call vote.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, I won't take as long as Steve did, but I will say that, because he said it all, but you know, everything that happened around here happens because of you. You're involved in almost every aspect of everything that we do. You know everything about whether it's policy, finance, whatever committee, you're there to help. And I have no idea. I knew this day was coming for a long time, you know, someday, but I hoped it was someday far into the future. And I don't know how this district is going to replace you. I honestly don't. But it's been wonderful working with you. You've just been just such a great example of someone who really cares about kids and cares about the people in this town. In the face of everything that happens, you're always calm and you always find a way through. So I've been really honored to work with you, and thank you for all that you've done for all of us.
Thank you. So, an even more unlikely friendship than Daphne and Pat is Daphne and Stephanie. And Stephanie and I have spent a lot of time together over the past year and a half, and I've really Stephanie knows her stuff, and she does keep everything close. She has a no button on her desk, and it just says no, so you don't even have to talk to her, just press the button. But it was truly a gift, like Betsy said, to get to know you, these unlikely friendships that formed, and I just have to say that there is no one in the district with more integrity than you have, and I wish you all the best.
Stephanie, I'll say that you often think you're invited to a meeting to be the no person. So I didn't know you had a no button, but you know, we'll invite Stephanie to a meeting and we'll say, so what do you think of this idea? And nope, here's why you can't do it. But you never leave, sort of like what Steve said, without some ideas for how we can do it. So I appreciate all of your wisdom. You've made me a better board member. I'm sure I can say that for all of my colleagues. But you really do think about the students. And when we have an idea that can't happen for a whole bunch of bureaucratic and logistical reasons, you help us figure out what can. So thank you.
Just thank you. And that you've really told me it's all about the budget. I actually really get that. So I will carry that on for you. Thanks.
And I just want to say, you know, I've been on the board 1 year. I've known about your nose for probably 15 years because I first heard of you through Bill Cirillo, who said, don't tell Stephanie about the gardens. Let's not tell Stephanie. Let's not talk about insurance. But now I've come to work with you, and I'm so grateful, and I've learned so much from you. And I just admire you, and I think you have the patience of a saint. And, you know, coming onto the board at this kind of tumultuous time and just watching how you are able to absorb and listen and patiently continue to respond to people who can never stop asking you for questions, for more information, and some of us never stop asking you for information, and you're always very patient and fair and kind, and you know all the answers, and I really appreciate it, and I just admire you greatly. Thank you.
Just echo that as a new board member. I mean, the depth and breadth of your knowledge has been so helpful, and you've shared it so generously, and so we'll miss you, and thank you.
We're going to miss you a lot. And the first official correspondence I got as a new board member was from you, telling me about the training and the fingerprinting. And when I thought I'd never get fingerprinted and be thrown off the board before I even started, you know, just you've been there at every stage for all of us. And for all you've done for the staff, the district, the students, you've also personally, it's been a real pleasure working and being your friend. So thank you.
Stephanie, I don't know about this no stuff. Every time I talk to you, you seem very reasonable. You give explanations, and we discuss stuff well, and you explain why maybe we could try a different approach or alternative.
But you remember, Bill, I told you no today.
Yeah, well.
It's still no.
It's only 10,000 more. That's all we need, but. Yeah. But I do appreciate your willingness to listen to lots of ideas, some good, some bad, some probably all crazy. we'll miss having you around, and I'll probably have something better prepared in a couple months from now when you're ready to leave. But I look forward to working with you for a couple more months.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for all of your kind words. It's very nice. Appreciate it.
Did you change your mind?
No.
The final no.
But we can, but we could vote no, right? Could we vote no?
Well, maybe it's time for a vote. Maybe we'll all vote no, Stephanie.
Okay.
So we already had a motion, so this is a roll call vote.
Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
When I started here, I didn't have to wear these glasses. Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yep.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you all again.
Okay, so we now need a motion for item L2, the appointment of a interim business administrator. Can I have a motion, Debbie, and a second, Bill? And this is also roll call? Okay. And I don't think we have any questions. Yes.
Pat Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jess Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
And Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, L3, I think Debbie alluded to this in her board report. I don't know if anyone has any other questions about the Janus ruling. If not, then we can move on. And actually, L4 as well, Debbie referred to. You know, and this is something that Lou has put together. Lou, we're going to miss you. There's going to be, you guys are going to have a lot of chances for us to say speeches about you, and you know, you've done a. If you like this kind of thing, you did it right. But Lou, thank you for all your work on this. As Debbie said, a really impressive track record, national sort of prominence in terms of the things you've done. But this mentoring program is a terrific thing. We just need to approve it tonight. But any questions or comments on it other than that? But I just wanted to thank you for all your work on that, Lou. And we will vote on that in our consent agenda. So then, moving on to item M, do we have any, I believe this is, well, actually, there are a couple of action.
I'm not sure why that one's listed as an
M3,
action.
it's all consent. So, are there any questions on any of the M items of the agenda? Okay, if there are none.
Can I just make,
Yes.
can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight number 3, the Educational Consultant Sage Wellness Group. This is a consultancy that will help us with the restorative justice piece of our work as a district. So Dr. Tara Doty, who has been working with us on culturally responsive teaching and implicit bias training and is well acquainted with Princeton public schools and with the town of Princeton, is going to be continuing that work and bringing in a colleague of hers who's been trained in restorative justice and restorative practices. He works in Maryland and as a vice principal there and is also a trainer. And so we're going to be bringing the two of them in, someone who knows our school well, someone who knows restorative justice really well, and we're excited to sort of take the next step in the continuation of the work that's coming out of our equity audit.
Great, thanks, Steve. Okay, so then we move on to item O.
N.
Sorry, N. Sorry, any questions on item N, on N items of our agenda? And if there aren't, then move on to O.
There's one action in O.
There's one action item, which is the bond, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And that is, well, actually, it says on mine that they're all consent. Which one is, unless it's?
Number 3
Number
is.
3?
Oh, 3.
That's the determination of form and sale
Oh,
of
sorry,
bond.
it's up at the top of the page. Okay,
Yeah.
so we need a motion for item 03. Greg, and a second. Bill? Any questions or comments on this? It's been discussed we already thanked Mr. Perry, but I'd like to thank Ralph Perry and many of the others who took an interest in this issue and had real input in how it got done. So he should be proud of all of his hard work on this. And thanks to the Finance Committee and you, Stephanie, for all of your work on this. It's a big win for the district. And this is a
show of hands.
Show of hands. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. We also talked already, Daphne already talked about the acceptance of the donation from the JP PTO, but it's always great when our PTOs support our students. It's a pretty exciting project. Many of us were there to see it, and it's pretty nice. And so we thank them and all the parents who support public education in our town. Any other questions or comments on any of the consent items on the agenda? Because if not, then we go to item P, which is our consent vote. And this is show of hands. Wow. Okay. First and a second for all consent items. Betsy, and second Bill. And show of hands. Okay, all in favor. It's unanimous. And with that, we'll have one last public comment period, Mr. Montgomery. And anyone else who wants to speak, but this is your time.
Curmudgeon taxpayer. Can't add words to the plaudits, but I can add dessert, however mangled. In May of 2014, Admiral William McRaven, he's not here, is he? No. Yeah. Any other Navy SEALs here? No, so I'm safe. Gave a commencement speech at University of Texas at Austin, titled Life Lessons from Navy SEAL Training. He later, by popular demand, expanded that into a book, Make Your Bed. I've previously inflicted upon this board some culinary concoctions inspired by Admiral McRaven, and I will do so again this evening. Part of a Navy SEAL training is Hell Week, and part of Hell Week is a immersion in the Tijuana mudflats. The purpose is to weed out the weak trainees. One of the instructors stood up with a bullhorn and spoke very calmly and soothingly to the trainees who were, after 3 days of no sleep and strenuous exercise, immersed up to their necks in mud, in the mudflats. He invited them to come up and enjoy hot chicken soup by his fire and coffee. All they had to do is 5 trainees had to quit. Now, one of the trainees started to crack, another one grabbed him, and then one of the trainees started singing. It was apparently quite a vulgar song, but well known. And soon every trainee in the group was singing. And the instructor yelled at them, "Stop singing!" Nobody stopped. And then the instructor smiled because he knew that the group had bonded, we had bonding, and that none of them was going to quit. If you want to change the world, when you're up to your neck in mud, start singing. So, I have for each of you, to the extent that they have survived transport, a little mud flat garnished with little trainee heads in 2 skin complexions, and adorned with the crossed trident and anchor of the Navy SEAL insignia. Unfortunately, this one got mangled, and I think all the others did too. But that's what I got. Nah, I lied. One more thing. It would not be appropriate for you, when you start singing, to sing the song, the vulgar song that the SEALs did. What I suggest is the hippopotamus song. Mud, mud, glorious mud, nothing quite like it for cooling the blood. Follow me down to the hollow, and there let us wallow in glorious mud. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your hard work for Princeton students.
Gotta love Princeton board meetings. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That was terrific. Yeah. While Mr. Montgomery's passing those out, this will not probably do justice to Mr. Montgomery.
Happy holidays to you.
Yeah,
That's
but
so clever.
something for you. Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. You still need here. More than one, I think. Yeah, I think I said I would take you out for a few. I remember that night.
Oh, good, yeah.
You made this yourself?
Oh, thank you. How much time did this take? Wow. There we go. Thank you so much. That was 18 minutes and 45 seconds.
It is real mud. It's mud. No, it's pudding and kicks and yeah. No, I know. It's like it's not like a cookie. It's real. There's spoons attached. Yeah. No, I thought it would be like a cookie, not mud pudding. It's getting late. Oh, thank you very much. I'm gonna. Very clever. Yeah, really appreciate all your work. Thank you so much.
Well, that's a great book. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that book. Gold.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Have a happy holiday. Now, should we, well, while you're packing up, just wanted to thank you again for all the work that you've done, Mr. Montgomery, keeping an eye on us and making sure that, everything's on the right track. You've been a, almost perfect attendance record at not only board meetings but committee meetings, and so we appreciate your interest in the public schools. And with that, I think we just need a motion to adjourn. Jess, and a second. Beth, okay, and we're adjourned. Good year.
Wow, congratulations, Pat.
Thank you. Congratulations to you. You did such a nice job. Like you've done with everything.
Really?
Thanks for everything.
I'll second that.
Yes.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
did that should get approved? January, board meeting in January, whenever that is, end of January.
And why no August start date for the kids?
Well, part of the reason, the primary reason is we passed a referendum and we may need the time in the summer to complete critical construction projects.
Perfect. And the schools will be closed on election day in November and the primary in June?
Correct.
2020 schools closed just for everybody, or just for some?
Just for the kids, staff development days.
And just on the referendum, when is this stuff going to get started?
I'm sorry.
When is for the referendum? When is things going to get started?
Right away. So we're selling bonds on January 9th. And we've got on the agenda tonight was